Hello, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. My name's Jackie, and today I'm going to take you through the first of 3 sessions we're running this week on VAT. So we're looking at steps 1 and 2 of the VAT return, which is the preparation and reconciling with ease. We do have additional sessions this week. We will have more information at the end of the session and also in your follow-up email today, so please keep an eye out for those. Just before we begin though, we'll just do some housekeeping first of all. So first of all, you have been placed on mute. That means you can't speak to me today, but if you do have any questions, you are more than welcome to send them across to me throughout the session. You can use the icon that looks like a speech bubble with the question mark in the middle, and that will allow you to send your questions across to myself. We've also got a copy of today's slides, so if you do want to take a copy of the slides, you can do there using the icon that looks like a document with a folded corner. I am on my own today, so if you do have any questions, please bear that in mind. I will try and cover as many as I can during the session. If not, we will hold on to them to the end of the session. Okay, so this is what we're going to cover. So just going to do a really quick introduction to the VAT return. And today is really heavy on the demonstration side of things. So we're going to go through those 2 steps on the VAT return. And what we're going to try and do along the way is highlight lots of places where we get calls through to technical support and where things tend to go wrong or where we get a lot of questions. So we're going to try and do that along the way for you. At the end, we'll show you where you can find further help and support as well. Now I do have a quick poll before we begin. I'm just going to launch that immediately there. Which return do you generate? Now what we mean by that is, are you doing a UK VAT return, or are you doing a Republic of Ireland return, or are you in that situation where you're actually doing both? Do you have multiple companies and have multiple obligations? So please do let us know in the poll there. So I'll just give that a moment or two. There is a slight delay on the poll. Get that sent over. And if you can pop your votes through, I can see them starting to filter through there. That's great. Okay, we've got 70% of you voted, so we'll close the poll there. Thank you very much for taking part. And I will just share it as well, just so you can see. So as you can see there, we've got 85% of you are doing a UK return, and we do have a portion of you using a Republic of Ireland return, 15% there. So luckily we don't have anyone doing both. It's a sort of a tricky situation to be in, where you've got 2 returns for different legislation. Now today we are going to be using a standard UK return, okay? So we will be going through the return in a UK company. However, if you are joining us from Ireland, we will along the way show you the differences. So don't worry if it doesn't look like yours, it will look slightly different, but all of the principles that we're going to talk about are exactly the same in both countries. So I'm just going to hide that. I'm going to go back to sharing my slides. There we go. And just briefly want to talk about one-to-ones as well. So if you do find after today's session you do want a little bit more bespoke training and you'd like to look into one of our one-to-one sessions, then bear in mind we do offer one-to-one training. And that can be across different topics. You might be looking at things like stock control, might be the banking features, or it could just be that you've upgraded to professional and you want to get the most out of your software. So there is an email there that is on the slides, again, if you want to download that. And if you use that email address there, what will happen is we will give you a call for a personalised quote based on your needs. So do remember we do have one-to-one training available as well. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to jump into my demonstration data and just get into the VAT return window. So as I mentioned, we're in a UK company here. So the first thing you will notice if you're in Ireland is you have some slightly different options along the top, but you will still have the option for the VAT return. You will also have things like your VAT return and RTD return within here too. So this VAT module is essentially a list of all your previous VAT returns. but also if you have done things like EC sales list in the UK or RTD and VAT returns in Ireland, then they are all held within this one location. It's almost like a filing cabinet for all of your VAT related returns. So here we are, and this is my history of all of my previous returns. And what's great about this is it allows me to log into previous returns and have a look at the figures there. So I can actually see the VAT return. I can look at things like adjustments, I can print the return, and I can have a look at the verification results from previous returns as well. So it's great that's all held in one single place for me to look at again. The two steps we're going to go through today on today's session is actually these two at the top, step 1 and step 2. So you can't see those just yet. I will show you in a moment. And step 3, we're going to be looking at tomorrow afternoon. So if you do want to register for that session, that will be available later on for you. So I'm going to close out of here first of all, because that's taken me into that previous return there. And what we want to do is we want to start a VAT return from scratch. And this is quite a common call for people who are maybe new to VAT, is how to get into a blank VAT return. Because if I've got this one highlighted here, and I click on VAT return, you can see it takes me into the one I have highlighted. So just remember, you do have the option to swap and clear here. So clear will clear any highlighting you have available. So now you can see nothing's highlighted. If I go back to VAT return, it takes me into a blank return. So that's step 1 that we're in there now. So we're going to go through these steps, but what I do just want to highlight is all of the steps on the side are pretty much identical. On this side, this is where the difference is between the UK and Ireland. So in the UK, we've got 9 boxes labelled 1 to 9. In Ireland, we have 11 boxes, and then numbering or labelling is slightly different. However, the things like the drill down, etc., are all exactly the same in how they work. Okay, so we're going to start with step 1. So step 1, first thing is to take a backup of your data. So it's telling me my last backup was back in July. So it's definitely something that I need to do, is to take a backup of that data. And it will also prompt me to check your data. So I'm going to say yes to that. We want to make sure that we've got no errors in the data, because errors can indicate that there's damage to the files. But also we want to make sure that we've got a point of return. So once I click reconcile on a return, that means that that return is complete. I can't then go back and redo that same return with those same details with the sort of same ability. So it kind of, what we're trying to do is make sure that we've got a point of return, because once we've clicked reconcile, those transactions are flagged and they're almost filed away, so they don't get picked up again unless we tick a box to include them. And it's not always a quick fix if we've done that in error. So we always say, do not come into the VAT return without having a backup of the data. The check data is indicating if we've got damaged files. So as you can see there, I've got no problems to report on mine, so that's great. That's exactly what I'd like to see. And then it will allow me to continue with the backup there. So if I was to accidentally click on reconcile, the best course of action is to restore this backup that we've taken here at this point. So next we're going to move on to the date range. Now this might be quite self-explanatory, but there's a few things on here that do cause quite a few questions. So first of all, I am on a quarterly return. Okay, now if you find yourself in a position where you're on a monthly return, that's absolutely fine. And the same with an annual return. So that can all be selected from within here. Now I'm doing October to the end of December. I appreciate I'm a little bit ahead of time, but just for today's demonstration, that's what we're going to use. But like I say, you could select monthly or annually if you needed to. What's best to check is just to make sure that you do have the date range right, and it is telling you if it's a quarter that you've got 3 months there. Also, if you're in the UK and you're under Making Tax Digital rules, you do need to make sure that this date range matches what you have on your HMRC Government Gateway login as your obligation period. If you do a different period, then that can cause issues with the submission process. So please do be careful with that. Now, the two areas that cause a lot of questions are the custom date range and the include reconciled transactions option. So if I use custom date range, that allows me to select a date from and a date to without being a full month. So this is something you might want to use if you're maybe trying to sort of run something to look at your VAT liability for maybe a 6-week period, so it's not a full month, or you're running for a very specific date range. Now, to be honest, the majority of the time we use the whole month option, okay? And that would be my standard advice, would just be to use the whole month option. However, just to give you an example of the last time we had to use it here, it was actually nearly 5 years ago when we had a leap year. Now, we had a leap year this year, it didn't cause as many problems. I think we resolved the issue. But in the past, we have had issues where it doesn't recognise the 29th of February. So what we had to do is use whole months, use custom date range and pop it in to the 29th of February to pick up those transactions. So quite a rare scenario, but the option is there to help us get around those sort of troubleshooting issues. So I'm going to stick back to use whole months because that's what I'd recommend normally. Got my 3 months there. And the next one is this tick box. Should I tick this tick box or not? Now, this is a box that we tend to use when something has gone wrong, okay? If this is the first time I'm ever doing my VAT return from October to December, we shouldn't have any reconciled transactions already for October to December, okay? So really ticking this box shouldn't make any difference. When we tend to use that is when we don't have this option here for a backup because the backup wasn't taken, and somebody has accidentally reconciled October to December. And then we need to rerun the return, but because they've got the reconciliation flag, we need to tell it to include those ones with the flag. Now, it's not perfect, okay? This is why it's almost plan B when something's gone wrong. Because when you run your VAT return, not only does it look at the moment from October to December, it also looks back in time prior to October for anything that should be reconciled that's not. So things like corrections and late entries. When we have to use this option, if they've already been reconciled by the previous return that we did in error, it doesn't do that, okay? So it does mean you could potentially be missing out transactions. So that's why this is plan B. So normally for day-to-day, you do not need to tick that box. Again, we tend to use that when something's gone wrong and we're giving you advice on how to try our best to resolve that. Okay, so next we're going to move on to the final part of part 1, and that is the VAT verification checks. So within here, we've got 8 checks that can be set up on your data, which I'll just bring across there. So these 8 checks are flagging things that maybe look a little bit odd in your data. It's not saying they're wrong, but it's saying please do double check this before you submit to HMRC. So just saying this one looks a little bit different, you just need a little bit of attention before you continue. And it may just be that the result of that attention is you just ignore it. So what you can get it to do is these 8 checks. Now they can be switched on or off by ticking or unticking the boxes. You can also select all and then clear them, or select all again. My advice would always be leave them on initially, and eventually you'll start to see which ones are flagging up things that are relevant and which ones are maybe not working quite for your business type. So it looks for things like duplicate transactions. Now again, your business type may be of a model that has lots of duplicate transactions, in which case you might want to switch this one off because it will just start flagging most of your transactions for you. But if you don't have lots of duplicate transactions, this may genuinely find a transaction that has been popped in duplicate in error. We've got invoices and orders that have been posted, but they're not actually on the ledgers. So they've been entered into the software and they haven't been updated to the ledgers. That means they're not actually hitting the VAT return. So we'll have a look at those in just a moment. We've got VAT values for transactions. Now this is where we've got a slight difference in Ireland. Okay, so your range, your sort of error range is slightly different based on the fact that your VAT rate is 23% rather than 20. So you'll find yours is slightly higher and slightly different on these two boxes here. The next one, and this one really commonly flags things up, is the option there to identify sales and purchase transactions not using your most common tax code. Now this is probably the most likely one that you're going to see, because you probably won't post every single transaction on a T1 tax code. You're probably using some T0s, some T2s, some T5s in there as well. So what it will do is it will flag anything up that's not your most common tax code that you stipulate here. So if you tell it it's T1 and then you post a transaction on a T0, it will flag that to you to say, hey, you've posted this on a T0. Now it's not to say it's wrong, because lots of transactions do need a T0, but it's just saying double check this before you post this. So a quick question there is, we've been registered for VAT from 18th of September. Would our first VAT return be from the 18th of the 9th to the end of December? So it's likely it will include the beginning of September. However, what I would suggest you do is check with either HMRC or ROS as to what their quotas are, just in case they want you to start from October and just pull those through into October. So just double check with HMRC or ROS, just depending where you're based. I would hate to give you the wrong details and then cause you issues with the VAT return. So please do double check there. Okay, so that takes us to the end of step one. Okay, I'm happy with my dates, I've got my backup, and I'm running all the verification checks at the moment. So what I'm going to do is click calculate. And this is where, if you've got a large data set, this might take a little bit of time because it needs to look at all of those transactions for you. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I'm doing my return for October to December. Now what will happen is it looks back prior to October for any transactions that should be reconciled but have not been reconciled. And as I mentioned earlier, that tends to be things like late entries or corrections. So what it has done is it's done that, it's identified I've got two transactions here. Okay, so I've got a purchase invoice and a purchase credit here. So what we need to do at the moment is investigate these to see, why are they coming through? So the first one's probably not as obvious, but they do sneak through every now and then. And in this case, it's a late entry. So we've received an invoice extremely late and we've entered it with the correct date because we want it to age correctly in the software. And with that, it's come through on this return. So it's been entered with a date at the end of March, but actually it's being picked up now. So I do need to include that if that's a genuine invoice. If there's a problem with that invoice, for example, the date's wrong, or there's something wrong with that invoice, you need to go and address that now, okay, before you go any further with the VAT return. Now in this case, we're going to say it is a late entry and that we're happy to include that because we do need to submit that to HMRC. The next one is a bit easier to sort of understand because the details explain there. So what this was it's an invoice that has been included on a previous return. So we had an invoice, and because that invoice was VAT reconciled, what it does is it just posts the opposite for me. So it's posted a purchase credit note. And you'll be able to track that back because it tells you what transaction number to take a look at. So we've got a late entry and an error correction. So those are the two scenarios where you'd want to include those in the next return. So I'm going to select include. Now the option to ignore would ignore both of them. Okay, you can't pick one to include and one to ignore. It's all or nothing. So if you do find something in here you do need to ignore, that's fine, but you will need to deal with it before your next return because it will just pop back next time. Okay, it will remain there until you do something about it. So I'm going to include both of these, and they'll be included in the figures that we have over here. And that takes us on to step 2 of the VAT return. So this is reconciling the VAT return. And this step is basically where we get familiar with the figures, we make sure we're happy with those figures before we move on to reconciling it here. So this button here, we don't go near until we're 100% happy with the figures we have here, and we've run all of the reports, etc., to confirm those figures. Now, what you would do at this point is you would compare your VAT return to a series of reports. Now, those reports can all be found in this reconciliation reports button. Now, I will not be going into that today because, again, we've got a dedicated session on that. I think it's Wednesday afternoon, I believe. I will find out that for you in a moment, and the exact time for you. But we will do a whole 45-minute session on reconciliation reports. Okay, so that's why I'm not covering it just now because it's a dedicated session on it. But we're going to look at all of the other options here. So first of all, on the right hand side here, we've got the boxes. Okay, and it's the same in Ireland, although you've got slightly different labelling and you've got 2 additional boxes. But what you will have is some of those boxes will have the drill down option. Now the drill down allows you to click onto that box and it allows you to see the breakdown of how that box is calculated by transaction type and also by tax code type as well. So as you can see, all of this particular value here consists of T1 sales invoices. But if I had some bank receipts, again, they would show over here. Now I can actually drill on this further. So if I want to see where that £680 has come from, I can drill onto that and it gives me a breakdown right down to transactional level. So I can see exactly what transactions are making that value there. Now most boxes have them. The boxes that won't have them are those that are calculation boxes. Okay, so for example, box 3 in the UK is box 1 and 2 together. So really the drill downs we're going to do is those ones there. So that's another way you can check your figures and start looking into the boxes on your return. Now we've got some of the verification results have come back with some things for me to check. So what I can do is I can view the results and it shows me which ones it's highlighting. So I don't have any potential duplicates, but I do have a couple here. We've got some invoices and credits not updated. And I can see there's a list of invoices here and they haven't been updated to the ledgers. Now they're over a year old, so I'd start to be thinking about whether or not they're live invoices or not. It is possible to ignore them, so if it's something that you don't need to include on the VAT return, you can ignore them, but again, they will be flagged up each time there. So these invoices here, they're just ones that I've set up to try and test the module. So I've been playing around with the module. They're not live, so I can ignore these. But if these were meant to be live and they were meant to be updated, I'd need to come out of the VAT return, go back, update the ledgers, and then recalculate from scratch. So I'm going to ignore those ones. But if you did need a list, so if you did have a lot in here, you can send to Excel or print the list there. We've got a purchase order, which has been delivered, but not invoiced. So again, I can have a look at this. So this is even older. So the goods were delivered, we didn't receive an invoice. So is it a matter of me maybe chasing the invoice, or was that never a live order? Do we need to delete the order? Again, if you needed to update it, you'd need to come out of the VAT return, update the ledgers, and then recalculate from scratch. And as I mentioned earlier, this is the one that will probably always come up with something for you, and that is the transaction not using your most common tax code. So my most common tax code I stipulated as being a T1. Let's have a look. We've used a T0 on this transaction. Really all we need to do here is check, is T0 correct for that transaction? If so, we can ignore it. If not, then we might need to go back and amend that. Okay, so it might just be that we need to change that onto T1 and change the net VAT split on there. But I'm happy that that was a genuine T0, so I can ignore that. Okay, so I'm going to close. And that removes those for me. The next thing I'm going to just take a quick look at is the adjustments option here, which is just here. Now this is a feature that should really only be used if you've got an indication from HMRC or ROS that you should do so, your accountant has asked you to do so, or you're on a very special VAT scheme that requires you to do an adjustment. So this is not to do if you've got an error to correct or you've realized you've missed a transaction. This is not the route to do that. Okay, I know it's probably quicker, but our suggestion would be to remove yourself from the VAT return, go and do the transaction and then recalculate from scratch again. The reason we say that is because the make adjustments option does post a journal. Okay, so although it's just adjusting the VAT return figures, it will post a journal because it is making a change to your VAT return that you're submitting to HMRC or ROS. I will, however, show you how to use the feature. So you can use the option to click on Make Adjustments, and it shows you which boxes you can actually adjust. Okay, so only those with the edit icon next to them. So say, for example, I had a notification from HMRC to amend box 1. You click on the icon there and I can pop in the reason, HMRC advice. I could pop in a ref. And then I can pop in, if I tab across to the adjustment, and that could be a negative one if I wanted to put a negative sign. In this case, I'm just going to pop on 100. And I can save. As you can see there, we've got the original calculated figure in box 1. Then we've got the adjustment and now the new reported figure based on that adjustment. So you can see the adjustment before you actually go ahead and save. But when I click close, box 1 is now updated with that new figure. So it's quite easy to do an adjustment, but we do also have the option to add an attachment. And that allows you to attach any documentation. So if you do have a letter from HMRC, for example, or your accountant, or if you're on one of those special VAT schemes, partial exemption is a really good example, then I would suggest that you add your calculation or your letter in here, and it just allows you to hold that alongside your VAT return. So if you are audited in, say, 5 years' time, you've got all of that documentation held in one place. Okay, so as I mentioned, you've got the reconciliation reports, but you do have the option to print the VAT return. And you've got options for a VAT return, which is just as you can see on the window here. But you've also got a summary, and it's normally the detailed report that we recommend you run. It is a large report, so I'd probably say save it to file rather than printing out, because it's probably going to kill off a few trees, even if you're quite a small business, because it's a really, really detailed report. But you can also have a look at any adjustments. So you can run a report on your adjustments and also any earlier unreconciled transactions. Okay, so there's a quick question coming through there, which I will address, and I think I touch on it again in the summary, is what sort of errors can cause a balance to remain on the VAT liability nominal codes of payments match returns submitted? So I'm assuming, I don't know if you mean the sales and purchase tax control accounts, they will never sort of return to zero. that's one thing we do get asked a lot, is why doesn't it come back to 0? And that's because they're cumulative nominal codes. They're constantly being updated. Other things you're seeing there, if it's why is there a balance remaining on the VAT liability nominal code? That could be to do with different things being journaled onto the VAT liability, or it could be manual adjustment. So there's probably a few different things you might need to look at. For us to have a sort of detailed look at that, it might be worthwhile giving our technical support team a quick call just so they can have a look at that for you, maybe have a look at the activity on that nominal code with you. So it could be journals to the wrong nominal code, it could be manual adjustments used in error, and it could just be if people have been doing the VAT return transfer journals, if they've been doing them manually, it could be that there's been transposition of numbers, etc. So historically, lots of people did it manually. It's something we're going to cover in a bit more detail on tomorrow's session, but there's a few different things that could potentially cause that. Okay, so I'm at the end of step 2, and this is where I'm going to reconcile the return. Okay, and this is going to set it in stone. So this basically means that once I've done this, the only way back is really to restore that back up. It may take a while. So when I click on here, mine goes through very quickly, but yours may take a little while to go through. So it's saying there it's noticed I've made an adjustment, but I haven't added any supporting documents. So it's letting me know, it's helpful to have those documents handy. Do I want to do this now? So I'm going to say no, because you can still add it later as well. And then it asks, do I want to flag transactions as VAT reconciled? So I'm going to say yes to that because we do need them VAT reconciled. And that takes me to the end of step 2. But what I just want to show you there, coming out of here, is that's now added it to my list. Okay, so that's on my VAT return list. But not only that, as a result of that VAT return, a manual adjustment has taken place between my VAT liability and also my manual adjustments nominal code 2204. And that's for that adjustment. Okay, so it's caused a movement of funds from one nominal code to another nominal code, but it's quite clearly labelled manual adjustment to VAT return, so it should be easy to decipher that. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop back to the slides because we will be picking up tomorrow from this step here, and that's posting the journal, submission, and also posting the payment. But tomorrow is a quick learn, so it should be a maximum of half an hour. So I'm going to pop back to the slides and just skip through these slides here. So these slides were designed just to show you there the difference between the two. As you can see, the left-hand side's very similar to the island return, but the right-hand side, we've got a few different boxes and labelling there. So please do get your questions across there to us, okay? So I've had a couple of questions there. If you can get some additional questions to us, that would be great. We can get those answered for you. And just going to quickly talk about your help and support options as well. So I'm just going to bring this page across. So if you go to sage.co.uk/help, it will take you to our help page. And in here, if you select Sage 50 accounts, it then asks you what you need help with. So there is a whole section on manage your VAT. Okay, in here, it will ask you where you're located, so it can give you the relevant information for the area that you're in. So I'm just going to remove that there. So there is information on setting up and processing, how to submit, and if there's a problem with your VAT return. Okay, so if you get any issues with submitting the return there. So this is a great point of or port of call if you've got any questions around your VAT beyond the webinar. Have a look on here, and then you also have access to the chatbot as well. There's also links in here to get in touch. So if you do feel that you've exhausted all options there and you do want to give one of our team a quick call so they can have a look, then you can use the call now option too. Also, I'm just going to go back to the search option. You can type in here webinars, or you can go to sage.co.uk/webinars. And what that will do is give you a link to our recordings. So I think we counted this morning. We're doing a bit of a check over 180 recordings available. So there's lots and lots of content available for you. But this one here, webinars for Sage 50 accounts, will give you those live sessions that are coming up there. Okay, so tomorrow we've got batch changes. Now this is a great one at year end. You're trying to do changes at the end of year across multiple records. Well, if you're using account standard or professional, we have batch changes that can help you with that. We also have VAT Return Part 2, which is tomorrow afternoon. And Wednesday afternoon, we're going to be running the VAT reports session. So we'll run you through how to run those reports and what you're looking for to reconcile your reports with each other. And our last one of the year is myself. It's running your year end. So if you do find yourself in a situation where you've also got your year end at the end of the calendar year, you can join us for running your year end. The great news is we now have all of January now available for you as well. So we're going to be looking at clearing out data. So lots and lots of content, as you can see, coming up for January. And we're just finishing off the preparations for our banking excellence. I nearly called it badging excellence. Our banking excellence badge, which will be coming early in February. So if you're wanting to earn your next digital badge on our incredible system, and get yourself registered for that. Okay, so very quiet on the questions front there. So please do, if you've got a question, get that across to us just while we wait a few moments just to see if there's any final questions there. Just to sort of pop back to the previous question there, just want to bring up my data set. So if it's your VAT liability that you're finding has been sort of knocked slightly out, what you'll probably need to be looking at is, first of all, making sure you've only got one VAT liability. That is something that I've had in the past. So going into your nominal codes, just make sure you've only got one VAT liability nominal code. So mine's 2202. Just make sure you don't have any old ones sitting on here, maybe where much older journals have gone into. But taking a look at the history, you should be able to trace things like, just going to bring this across, any journals that have been posted. So what you should be seeing is something similar to mine, where you've got the transfers and the payment, and then if there's a manual adjustment. If you can see any other journals in there, that would indicate somebody else is posting something outside of the VAT return. So it could be, you know, going back to day one, you could have things like adjustments from accountants, etc. So it could probably need a little bit of digging into just to see what's causing that. Okay, so very, very quiet on the question front. Quiet sessions this week, just with it being in the run up to the Christmas break. But we are here all week, so please do come back and join us if you've got some time aside for some training this week. I think we'll look to end the session there though. So thank you very much for joining us. Take care, and we hope to see you on another session really soon. And if we don't see you before the holiday, we do hope you get an opportunity to enjoy a slightly different, sorry, an opportunity to enjoy a slightly longer break, not slightly different break. I'm just having a quick look there. There's another question just come through. My list doesn't show VAT under nominal. I only have transactions. So if you're in your nominal codes, okay, VAT under nominal. Sorry, just trying to translate your question there. Apologies. My list doesn't show VAT under nominal. I only have transactions. This is an interesting one, because what can sometimes happen, if you right click on any of these options down the left hand side, you can untick them. Okay, so that's one thing that might have happened. Okay, so try right clicking and just see if you've got a tick there. If you can't see it here, it could be your username. So I'd probably ask your manager logon to log in and see if they can just check your access rights. But it could well be that this has been unticked by accident. It's very easily done. As you can see, mine now says transactions under nominal codes. It's very easily done, basically. So it might just be that you've hidden the option without realizing. So give that one a go. Okay, I'm going to end the session there. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Like I say, please do, if you get the opportunity, enjoy that extended break, and we'll see you in the new year. Take care for now.